A second U.S. pilot has just been pulled out from deep inside Iran in what President Trump is calling one of the most daring rescue missions in modern military history. This comes on the heels of the president's 48-hour ultimatum to reopen the Strait of Hormuz or face what he warns could be devastating military consequences. And with that deadline already ticking, the question now is what happens when it runs out. Jerusalem Minute is next. A special war broadcast on the Jewish holiday of Passover, the Christian holiday of Easter. This is Jerusalem Minute here at the JNS Media Hub in Jerusalem, together today with my co-host Danny Seaman, the host of the Straight Up podcast on JNS, sitting in for Josh Haston today. There is so much news to report. Let's just get right into it. The big story over the weekend was the downing of an American F-15. A pilot lost, another plane, an A-10 Warthog, going in to try to locate the plane and the missing pilot. Also downed in total. 2 pilots went missing, but 2 pilots found.
2 pilots and the navigator of the F-15. The F-15 was shot down, and I heard Israeli pilots were interviewed this morning, and they were talking about how they train for this specific situation and how desperate it becomes after 48 hours. So he was really found on the edge of the point where it becomes desperate. But apparently there was, at least from what is coming out about the situation, the CIA had very special technology and secret things there, which God bless the United States for the abilities that they've developed, and were able to find this man and this American hero. And he operated according to, at least what the pilots say, according to all the things that they're taught to do. They didn't elaborate because there are a lot of things that they try to keep from the other side. But he was in contact with the CIA. They knew his location. They tried to keep it secret from the Iranians. The Iranians tried to storm the location. The Americans had boots on the ground in this case, which deservedly so. They needed to protect that American pilot. They had hundreds of special forces. They took out dozens of Iranians who were trying to besiege, and the IRGC were trying to get to the location, and were able to get him out in safely and bring him back to the United States.
And this may represent the first time that you saw hundreds of American boots on the ground.
Yeah, and it's also very interesting that on 3 weeks from now, on the 24th, will be the 56th anniversary of the 1980 Eagle Claw operation, which was the attempt by the Carter administration to try to free the 44 American prisoners who were at the hostages that were being held at the American embassy in Iran, going back 56 years ago, that they were already holding American hostages and were hostile to Americans. And unfortunately, that ended in tragedy. 8 Americans were killed. The operation failed miserably, and sort of created the impression from that point on that maybe they shouldn't get involved with Iran. And here you have 56 years later with a very strong American president and determination, amazing American determination to get this American out. And this was being celebrated in the news here in Israel today. We were
absolutely.
very happy.
And you can only imagine what would have happened if the Iranians had actually captured that soldier, if they would have, that pilot, if they would have had live hostages inside Iran. It could have been a major turning point in the war, but yet we see an amazing American victory, both to recover the downed pilots and also to destroy the planes, because the last thing you want is for those planes to come into enemy hands. And there was a reward being put out for the life of the pilots in Iran, which totaled something like 10 million rial, which is something about $60,000 from what is being reported. So not much of a major award, even though it would be for an Iranian. Yet hundreds again of special forces on the ground to take out those planes and to recover the missing pilots and the navigator. But President Trump said to NBC News that the downing of the plane in Iran will not affect efforts to negotiate with Iran. This is war, he says. We are at war. The president did warn that the time for negotiations is running out. He said on X time is running out. In 48 hours, the gates of hell will be opened against you. And he went on to post on social media, our military, the greatest and most powerful by far anywhere in the world, hasn't even started destroying what's left in Iran. Bridges next, then electric power plants. New regime leadership knows what has to be done and has to be done fast. President Donald J. Trump in capital letters. So the president who had said that there was going to be 10 days to negotiate, and he was talking about the opening of the Straits of Hormuz, entered into those negotiations. People suggesting that the president maybe was weak, didn't want to go ahead with another more intensified strike inside Iran, now putting the warning that 48 hours until the gates of hell. We also saw just over the weekend the bombing of the largest bridge in Iran, the one that leads from Tehran to Karaj. And the Americans are saying that that bridge was used to transport missiles and other weapons that were then being launched at Israel and Gulf allies all across the region. So it does seem like the President of the United States standing firm to his negotiation timeline and has some kind of an escalation strategy ready for the Iranians.
Well, he's made it very clear, and he's been very persistent with his position on this, and he has given them the opportunity. He has been very clear about his attempt, but I think he realizes that it's not clear who's running Iran anymore. The Ayatollahs, who were the religious figures there, are apparently out of the picture now, and it's the IRGC are the ones running things together with the Basij. Dozens of them are being taken out. They had a strike yesterday against the Iranian forces that took out a large part of the military commanders. So it's not clear who exactly is negotiating in whose name. The president of Iran is still around. He's the same one who said that. But the military are not allowing him to dictate his position. He's looked a long time ago saying that for the people of Iran, he thinks that it would be better to bring this to an end. But
even Pezeshkian, there's reports that he has been trying to resign his post and hasn't been allowed to do so, and claimed that he's only being allowed to read the scripts that he's being provided. It's unclear who's providing those scripts. So it seems like Pezeshkian is not the major power player inside Iran. There were talks that the Speaker of the Iranian parliament might have been in charge. And there's also been discussions that there really is no centralized command right now, that different scattered commands were given predetermined orders for what to do in the situation in which the central command would be broken down or eliminated, and they are doing that.
Yeah, they're doing what they were told to do and what is expected of them to do, and it's part of it's not only the military instructions, it's part of the whole concept of Shiaism that they want to die fighting. Another thing that a lot of people are saying, that you can't determine the outcome of a war just by an aerial assault. I beg to differ with that, because that's how Japan was eventually. You didn't have Americans on the ground in Japan. You defeated them with the Air Force, with overwhelming power, and that's probably what we're going to see here within 48 hours, by tomorrow. If the Iranians do not respond to the Americans, they will raise the level of the assault and eventually destroy the whatever is left of the ability of whoever is running Iran right now to continue running the place and make it so miserable for the population there that there's no way they can continue running Iran.
Right, and the president said, as we just said before, bridges next, then electric power plants. But it's a joint operation. It's not just the United States, it's also Israel. The Prime Minister of Israel stating just in the last days that the IDF has reportedly destroyed 70% of Iran's steel production capabilities, which obviously steel is used for these ballistic missiles and other military applications. And then earlier this week, the Air Force, acting on precise IDF intelligence, struck in Tehran, eliminated Jamshid Eshaki, the commander of the oil headquarters for the Iranian terror regime's forces. So Israel, the United States doing a tremendous amount of damage. President Trump addressed the United States about Iran on Wednesday. He talked about the progress made in Iran. He said that the goals were to stop the regime from getting a nuclear weapon and threatening America's interests outside its borders. He said that the military goals are almost met. He said that regime change was not the goal, but will happen because all the leaders were dead. We should remember that the first strike by Israel in this war was to take out the supreme leader. And there was also been reports in the overnight that the United States has taken out as many as 50 commanders of the IRGC in a massive strike that Trump actually shared on social media. And let's go out to President Trump's remarks, what he said on Wednesday.
Our objectives are very simple and clear. We are systematically dismantling the regime's ability to threaten America or project power outside of their borders. Thanks to the progress we've made, I can say tonight that we are on track to complete all of America's military objectives shortly, very shortly. We're going to hit them extremely hard over the next 2 to 3 weeks. We're going to bring them back to the Stone Ages where they belong. In the meantime, discussions are ongoing. Regime change was not our goal. We never said regime change, but regime change has occurred because of all of their original leaders' death. They're all dead. The new group is less radical and much more reasonable. Yet if during this period of time no deal is made, we have our eyes on key targets. If there is no deal, we are going to hit each and every one of their electric generating plants very hard and probably simultaneously. We have not hit their oil, even though that's the easiest target of all, because it would not give them even a small chance of survival or rebuilding. But we could hit it, and it would be gone, and there's not a thing they could do about it.
Well, I think it's important to note he's talking about this new generation of leaders in Iran, the next group as being more pragmatic. We're still waiting, as you said, to figure out who this more pragmatic regime is, what they look like.
I give Trump credit. He tries to paint an optimistic picture, tries to give the other side, this is part of his negotiation tactic, give the other side the opportunity, just like he did with Syria. Everybody knows who the Syrian leader is. Everybody knows where he comes from, but he's trying to give them this leeway to maybe wake up and be a bit more reasonable. But he's not a sucker. This is a president who understands the way the world or way people think better than most politicians. Politicians never really had to work in their lives. He worked in his life. He came into negotiation tactics. So I think he's applying the same things he did in business with the world. With Syria, it's worked. I think he also, on the other side, they're looking at this and they don't understand what the hell's going on because they were so used to a certain pattern by the West for years. And suddenly this guy is showing that he has the cojones to be tough and serious with them. But at the same time, he suddenly shifts and he's messing them up completely. And this is an excellent, so they don't know what the Americans, and they can't plan for the next American stage because they don't really know what's happening. So this is brilliant.
Yeah, an amazing consistency by President Trump. People saying that Israel dragged President Trump into this war. But if you go back into interviews that the president has done many years ago. If you even go back to an interview that President Trump did with Barbara Walters in the late 80s, he specifically talks about Iran, about how they are malign actors that are interrupting oil trade, and said that the United States back then should go in and take the oil away. Let's go out to that clip.
I'm not here today because I'm running for the presidency. I'm here because I'm personally tired of seeing this great country of ours being ripped off.
But as far as Trump is concerned, our allies are only part of the problem. The real culprit is Iran.
Why couldn't we go in and take over some of their oil, which is along the sea?
How would you do that? Would you send in the Marines? Would you take a chance in a war?
Let them have Iran. You take their oil. That's what
How?
How?
I mean, do we want a war? What do you mean we
in,
take their oil?
You go in. You're
how
gonna have
do
a
we
war,
go
Barbara.
in?
You're going to have a war by being weak.
Okay, how do we go in? What do we do?
Excuse me.
Yeah?
You're going to have a war, and it's going to start in the Middle East.
What if the Soviet Union said, you do this to Iran, we're going to come in?
I don't believe they'd do it. The next time Iran attacks this country,
Go in and grab one of their big oil installations, and I mean grab it and keep it, and get back your losses, because this country has lost plenty because of Iran.
Meanwhile, in addition to the president, you have seen unified messaging among the top echelon of the administration, in particular, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, who has been an excellent spokesperson during the war, as well as Secretary of State Marco Rubio. So Marco Rubio said in a recorded televised message this week that this was our best chance to strike Iran. He pointed out that Iran was building an arsenal of drones and ballistic missiles that would have made its nuclear program impossible to stop and making it imperative for the U.S. to strike now. Let's go out to the clip.
Iran was trying to build a conventional shield, in essence, have so many missiles, have so many drones that no one could attack them, and they were well on their way. We were on the verge of an Iran that had so many missiles and so many drones that no one could do anything about their nuclear weapons program in the future. That was an intolerable risk. Under no circumstances can a country run by radical Shia clerics with an apocalyptic vision of the future ever possess nuclear weapons. And under no circumstances can they be allowed to hide and protect that program and their ambitions behind a shield of missiles and drones that no one can do anything about. This was our last best chance to eliminate that conventional threat, that conventional shield that they were trying to build. And the president made the right decision to wipe it out now.
Well, the United States has taken out thousands of targets together with the state of Israel, but yet Iran continues to launch ballistic missiles, not only at Israel, but also at other countries across the region. We just saw this morning footage that Iran had taken out an oil facility in Bahrain. They've hit in the United Arab Emirates and elsewhere. In fact, I had recently seen reports that the United Arab Emirates had taken more missiles and drones launched toward it than the state of Israel.
They fired 3 times more at the Arab countries in the area than they have at Israel.
And so in addition to the nuclear weapons and the ballistic missile stockpiles, and everybody is trying to guess or estimate as to how many ballistic missiles Iran had at the start of the war and how many are remaining. But in addition to the actual missiles themselves is the question of the launchers. The launchers represent a bottleneck in the Iranians' ability to fire at Israel and at the other nations across the region. It was once argued that Israel had taken out, together with the United States, some 50 to 70%, but you keep hearing the same numbers over and over again. A recent report said that Iran still has half of its missile launchers intact. Roughly half of Iran's missile launchers and thousands of one-way attack drones remain in Iran's arsenal, despite the daily pounding by U.S. and Israeli strikes against military targets over the past 5 weeks. Intelligence compiled in recent days also showed a large percentage of Iran's coastal defense cruise missiles remain intact, consistent with the U.S. not focusing its air campaign on coastal military assets, although they have been hitting ships, and those missiles allow Iran to continue to threaten the traffic through the strategic Straits of Hormuz.
Well, people have to remember, we're not talking about a terrorist organization here with limited resources. We're talking about what was considered the strongest Islamic country in the world, one of the major superpowers of the world. The estimates of experts, it's not only the region, they were that powerful. They were assisting the Russians with their war against the Ukraine. They were being assisted by China. They were developing the weapons for the Chinese and for the Russians. So they are, or at least they were, a major power. And people tend to ignore that fact that this country had dedicated itself to be anti-Western, anti-Christian, and Israel as a byproduct of that as being closer to them than anybody else, any of these Christian countries. But this particular regime here, at least the estimates of experts were that they would be able to launch 200 to 300 missiles a day at Israel. And we were planning for that. So right now, when we're having these missiles fallen, it's inconvenient, I can say. The loss of life is almost non-existent here. And we benefited because of the first strike, because of years of addressing the threats from Iran. So considering what could have happened, we should be grateful for the situation. And the inconvenience of it right now, yes, but this is going to be eliminated eventually.
On the international front, perhaps the greatest pain has been the closing of the Straits of Hormuz, effective closing. We see that traffic in the Persian Gulf and through the Straits, that waterway, that bottleneck at the opening of the Persian Gulf, in which 20% of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas moves through, has been reduced by about 90%. Iran is letting certain ships go through to nations that it considers part of its friendly axis, including China and Pakistan and others. Meanwhile, we're seeing that Iran is basically turning the Straits of Hormuz into a toll booth, charging massive fees for ships that want to get through. And President Trump has been a little bit coy on what his plans are regarding the Straits of Hormuz. On the one hand, he's giving Iran 48 hours before the gates of hell open for them to open up the Straits of Hormuz. So it's clear, it sounds clear that the United States does have an escalation strategy to force the Straits of Hormuz open. At the other hand, he is basically saying, you know, the United States doesn't need to do it. The United States is its own producer of oil, and rather it's these other countries, including the United Kingdom, France, others, that should be sending ships in order to guarantee that the Straits of Hormuz remain open. And so meanwhile, 40 nations, which didn't include the United States, attended UK-led talks on stopping Iran from holding the world, quote, hostage in Hormuz. But French President Macron said that a military operation to open the strait was unrealistic, as Gulf nations push for some kind of a military action. There is consensus that Iran should not be able to introduce transit fees on shipping, and that all nations should be able to use it freely, but nothing else was agreed to. These countries agreed that they would meet again in a week. Perhaps they're waiting to see what Trump is going to do after the 48-hour window closes rather. Meanwhile, China, Russia, and France blocked a UN Security Council resolution put forth by Arab countries who need for these straits to be open, because they're the ones losing the revenue of the oil sales through the straits. So it's an interesting situation. You have the President of the United States. You think that his major objective would be to be opening up the straits, because what that would do is reduce the price of oil around the world. And Americans do feel it. Even though America has oil, Americans and everybody else feel it when the price of oil goes up, the price of gasoline goes up. Trump wants these other countries to do it. They're not stepping up meanwhile.
Well, they are stepping up, just in the opposite direction. This is Losers Incorporated, a bunch of I don't even want to use the word, but you know what I'm meaning to. If this is a man who gets smacked by his wife on international media, and he sits around there and acts tough now with the Russians and with the Chinese, then we know exactly who we're dealing with. This guy, if you can call him a guy at all, it's the whole thing is embarrassing, but it's not different from French history. It's a world war because now we know that French have already surrendered, so that gives the stamp of approval that this is indeed a world war. I'm being ironic and cynical about it, but when it comes down to it, it is extremely irritating. This is a country that was saved by the United States less than a century ago, and he's already standing with the enemies of the United States. And it's infuriating to see this country that they're going to benefit, because he believes that he's enjoying both parts of this situation, when he doesn't understand this president is serious, and they're going to have to pay extremely. The Americans won't pay for this eventually. What is smart about Trump is that he understands how media operates, and this necessity of the West for immediate gratification and to get things. He's dictating the news cycle. He's every day giving them something else to report about. He knows that he's paying a price right now, literally, by the fact that the price of oil and gas is going up. But he knows that within a month, within 2 months at the latest, these things are going to change in the favor of the United States. And it's going to come at the expense of the Europeans and of the French. Their countries are going to be paying for it. He's going to have a country that his population are not happy with the situation. And the Americans, by the time the elections come out at midterm, will have the America stronger and more independent, at least from the oil needs, and the prices will be down to to where it hasn't been in a generation.
Well, we actually saw President Trump trolling Emmanuel Macron this week, talking about the incident that was caught on camera when Macron's wife slapped him on a plane. Let's go out to that clip.
Well, she did something that all of us wanted to do, or all of us want to do. This guy deserves to be smacked in the head and get your act together. He's really tough on Israel. You notice that? He's really tough on the Jews and on Israel. But when it comes to standing up for Western values, he's a smotut, we say in Hebrew, a dish rag.
Dish rag, that's right. And meanwhile, President Trump and also Marco Rubio making comments that the United States would actually consider pulling out of NATO, the North American defense and the North American and European defense alliance that has been in place really since almost since the aftermath of World War II. And the United States, we know that Trump in his first administration was very upset at NATO countries for not sharing their percentage of the defense burden, not putting a certain percentage of their own GDP into defense. And Trump criticizing NATO oftentimes during the war between Russia and Ukraine. But now looking at Europe's response to Trump saying we need to go in and enter this war with Iran, the UK saying no thank you, France saying no thank you, Germany saying, you know, this isn't our war. Now Trump and backed by Marco Rubio are looking for ways potentially for the United States to pull out of the NATO alliance.
I need to stress this here because a lot of people make an issue out of the $3 billion a year that Israel gets, that Israel spends all that money on military purchases within the United States. But even if it was a gift to Israel, $3 billion, the United States spends over $90 billion a year on the defense of Europe. And when the United States needed them to stand shoulder to shoulder with the United States, Europe was not there. Israel, on the other hand, is fighting at levels unforeseen since World War II with the United States. So anybody who has a problem with this, look us Israelis in the eye and tell us we're the problem. When $90 billion of your taxpayer dollars are going to countries who are not standing with you.
Exactly. When people talk about the $38 billion that the United States provides to Israel over a 10-year period, $3.8 billion a year, if President Trump pulls the United States out of NATO, that will be a savings well over and above any amount that's given to Israel. Meanwhile, Israel spends a much greater percentage of its own GDP on defense, and perhaps maybe more than any other country.
34%.
Yeah,
spend on
and
defense
unbelievable.
here.
Your tax dollars at work, but ultimately you see what Pete Hegseth, Marco Rubio have called the #1 and #2 most powerful air forces in the world flying side by side over Iran. So you see that Trump looking at what used to be what was known as the best allies of the United States, UK and France, holding them in very low regard today, and President Trump holding Israel in the highest of regard today. Meanwhile, we know that this war is a multi-front war. We're fighting not just against right now the mothership, the head of the terror octopus, which is Iran, but we're also fighting against the terror proxies. This war began on October 7th, fighting against Hamas. We've been fighting against the Houthis, which have recently entered into the war and are firing ballistic missiles at Israel, not only at Eilat, they even took credit this weekend for firing missiles at Ben Gurion Airport, near to Israel's population center in Tel Aviv. But perhaps the most dangerous, the hottest front that Israel has is fighting against Hezbollah in Lebanon. They are firing hundreds of rockets and missiles at Israel. I read recently over the weekend that maybe 70% of the missiles that are being fired by Hezbollah are being fired from north of the Litani River. We know that Israel has gone in and almost essentially taken all the land up to the Litani River, with talks about Israel staying there for the long term, potentially even, and we heard Bezalel Smotrich, the Minister of Finance, talking about making the Litani River the new border. We talked about that this week. Israel has absorbed the losses. Several soldiers killed this week in fighting with Hezbollah operatives, and Israel killing 15 Hezbollah operatives this week, according to reports that Israel's continued airstrikes against Hezbollah. The IDF says that it has assassinated the head of Hezbollah's navy and has killed 15 different operatives in one attack in southern Lebanon. And the IDF is reporting that approximately 1,000 terrorists have been eliminated and more than 3,500 targets struck in Lebanon just over the past month.
Well, we also know that after the sort of semi-ceasefire fire was achieved, that the Lebanese government were supposed to disarm Hezbollah. They didn't do anything with that. Not only are they not doing it, it finds out that many Shia who are connected to Hezbollah are members of the Lebanese military, or are supposed to I don't want to say fight the Hezbollah, but we're supposed to disarm them or make them subjective to the Lebanese government, which they're part of. They haven't done a thing. Not only did they not do a thing, Hezbollah was able to rearm and get weapons in there. This may lead to a situation, since it's quite clear that the Lebanese government is not only incapable, it does not control Lebanon. But the Hezbollah had trained for years by fighting alongside the regime of Assad in Syria against Syrians, against the Sunni in Syria. So Syrians themselves, and now the Sunni have taken over the government in Syria, they have a huge record to deal with the Shia, with the Hezbollah in Lebanon. So if Israel takes over the south of Lebanon, it'll be very much in the interest of the Syrians and to get revenge on the Hezbollah, who fought against them and murdered many of their civilians, to take control of those areas along the Bekaa Valley and the north of Syria, and make sure that there is control of Hezbollah. And you may have this very interesting cooperation, maybe not something that is signed, but an understanding between Syria and Israel that they both have an interest in disarming and getting rid of Hezbollah for once and for all. And then you can have, I don't want to say peace, because there will not be peace, but have quiet for the Lebanese people, and also have the Syrians getting rid and getting their revenge on the Shia in Lebanon.
Now, Israel's displaced hundreds of thousands of Lebanese residents from this area between the Israeli border and the Litani River. It's not the first time that Israeli troops over the decades have gone into southern Lebanon. They've held the territory. They have pulled out of the territory. They've been forced back in. UN peacekeepers, UNIFIL went in. It's never stopped Hezbollah from using southern Lebanon as a staging ground for Israel. So I think questions about, what are Israel's intentions? Will it take the land between the border and the Litani? What are the plans? How long does it intend to stay there? Is that territory that Israel would potentially consider applying its full sovereignty to, as opposed to some sort of a military occupation and some sort of a zone that doesn't really have a sovereign body, maybe similar to what's going on in Judea and Samaria? It would seem to me, at least, that the application of full Israeli sovereignty over southern Lebanon is something that the political establishment must be considering right now.
I don't know, and I think it's good. I think the Prime Minister Netanyahu is doing the same thing that Trump is doing. He's not saying anything. He's addressing issues. He's talking what the possibilities are, but what the goal is, just like with Gaza. Everybody wanted to know what's going to happen the day after. We didn't do a thing. We didn't announce a thing. But what is happening in reality is that 3/4 of Gaza is now under Israeli control. And it's military there at the moment. Lebanon is different for two reasons. First off, you have a population there that is not hostile to Israel. It was only the Hezbollah. Most of Israel and Lebanese do not have a problem between each other. So why say what your goals are? You're there, you're fighting the Hezbollah, you need to get rid of them. We moved to population. There are no civilians south of the Litani River anymore, so it allows us freedom of activity. The only non-combatants that were injured this week was by a Hezbollah missile that hit a UNIFIL position there. They fired, rather by mistake or not, unclear, but they hit a UNIFIL position in South Lebanon. UNIFIL is not necessary. It's a waste of time with their presence. The UN is a waste of time.
Well, it's not a waste of time. They actually provide cover, right? When UNIFIL is in place, they provide cover to Hezbollah, and they basically serve as the international community's preventative force to stop Israel from striking inside southern Lebanon. So it's clear that Israel has learned that peacekeepers in southern Lebanon cannot keep the peace. I hope also that the Israeli government will recognize that peacekeepers cannot keep peace in Gaza, as the Trump 20-point plan for ending the war in Gaza talks about the creation of an international stabilization force in Gaza to sort of take over from Hamas. Meanwhile, no country has signed up for the job of disarming Hamas.
They know it's an impossible task.
Meanwhile, the IDF proving that it is the only body that can establish peace for its own citizens. And we have seen, even though the prime minister has not been clear about what the political or the diplomatic goals in Lebanon are, the IDF, the defense minister, Netanyahu have basically all come out and said that restoring quiet to the citizens of the north who have not been evacuated from their homes during this war, that restoring calm for them is the first priority. And obviously the first responsibility for any government is protecting the physical well-being of its citizens.
There's also another element with South Lebanon. Many who left South Lebanon after Israel left over 20 years ago, the Christians, because they were persecuted in Lebanon by the Hezbollah. They took refuge in Israel, many of them in Europe and in the United States, but there are many here in Israel. Israel would have no problem in allowing Christians to return to South Lebanon, to their where they lived, and they're not a threat to Israel, and would provide the security necessary for northern Israel by their presence there. So this could very well be one of the consequences of this battle right now.
Now, we might have expected to have received many more missiles and rockets over the Passover holiday. Our enemies know when our holidays are. Remember that October 7th was the Jewish holiday of Simchat Torah, one of the major holidays on the calendar. Obviously, Passover, a major holiday. I think many people were preparing for their seders, the traditional Passover dinner, to be interrupted. There were 20 to 30 ballistic missiles fired at Israel from Iran, some from Yemen. There were also rockets and missiles fired from Hezbollah in Lebanon, and a senior defense official told Channel 14 that it's a matter of time until Naim Qassem is eliminated. Now, Naim Qassem took over for Hassan Nasrallah after he was killed. I don't know if Qassem was considered to be the top candidate to take over for Nasrallah, but Nasrallah's deputies, including Fuad Shukr and others, were also eliminated during earlier rounds of the fighting. So perhaps it is these threats, specifically on the life of Naim Qassem, who's now the head of Hezbollah, that is causing Hezbollah to think twice about firing the entirety of its arsenal at Israel.
Well, I don't know. It's hard to say what makes them do the things that they make. They hate Israel. That's all we need to know. So if it's not now, they'll find another opportunity.
Meanwhile, we see that half of the missiles fired at Israel over this weekend were intercepted. Half were allowed to hit in open areas, which goes according to the protocol of the Iron Dome and the missile defense systems. At least 2 missiles carried cluster bomb warheads, and we saw some of the damage in areas like heavily, densely populated areas like Bnei Brak. We've seen a lot of damage to buildings.
Yeah, but not the way it's being projected. That's very important to stress this, because there are those on the other side who are saying, oh, Tel Aviv is in shambles. Yes, it hits buildings, it hits neighborhoods, but...
We actually saw pictures and videos on Saturday of Israelis flocking to the beach. The beaches were as full as they had been, since midsummer. So you really see the spirit, the resilience of the Israeli people. We've got great warning system in place. We have great missile defense. We have enemies that cannot necessarily hit their targets.
Where were you on the holiday, on the Seder, on the eve?
We were at home in Jerusalem.
In Jerusalem. We went to my mother in Ashkelon, so we had missiles there as well. We finished Shulchan Aruch. You're supposed to start the meal, and we got the sirens. So we had to put everything aside, went down to the shelter there in Ashkelon, and everybody was down there, the whole building. Everybody was in one part or the other of the Seder. And so they started singing in the shelter, and different songs of the Passover. And then when the all clear came up, everybody went back to their home and completed the services. We then drove back to Jerusalem. Luckily, there were no missiles on the way, so we didn't have to stop and run into a trench along the way. But it's, we've been through worse as a people. I think it's maybe in our DNA that we know we're fortunate to be here in Israel, to have the country that we have, the ability to protect ourselves, something generations of Jews did not have. So it's another thing that we'll remember years from now. We'll be telling our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren that how Passover was back in the day. Remember what we did, and it'll be another one of these events that we've been through, and it's only for the best.
During the Passover Seder, you talk about how many miracles took place during the 10 plagues. And there's this confusing part of the Seder for many people. That we know that there's 10 plagues, but then the rabbis say, maybe there were 50 and maybe there were 250, right? And it's hard to understand that. But, in the history books, it's going to be written that during this holiday that the Iranians fired ballistic missiles at Israel, and for whatever reasons, including the missile defense systems, the ballistic missiles were basically ineffective, especially much less effective than they were intended to be. And so the question is that going to be recorded in the miracle in the history books as a singular miracle, or when you see that there was hundreds of missiles fired, was each one of them a miracle? So you can understand those passages today, maybe more so than in other years.
Exactly. When you talk about this being biblical times, this is exactly it. It gives so much meaning. While we were going through the Seder and talking about every generation we have to see ourselves as being taken out of Egypt, it's not only physically being taken out of, but it's also this whole situation of being a people, being strong enough and getting out of that. Sometimes it's the internal things that keep you down. And so it has so much stronger meaning now for the people when you understand that and see what we've gone through. You see these miracles. You cannot, but sometimes people take it for granted. And we see that even there in Egypt, 40 days later, they were on Mount Sinai. People had taken it for granted that God himself took them out of Egypt and out of slavery just 40 days before. So you sometimes understand why some people take it for granted that the miracles we're experiencing, yes, it's an amazing situation, amazing miracles. I'm not religious, but I don't put it past the fact that who knows who's being involved here.
Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu is also not religious, but on the eve of the holiday, he delivered a long address to the nation in the media, and he said that Israel has dealt 10 major blows to Iran and its regional proxies. He writes that the price we've extracted from Iran, this price was not only financial. In the spirit of the approaching Passover holiday, since the beginning of the War of Redemption, we have delivered 10 plagues upon the axis of evil. The plague of Hamas in Gaza, the plague of Hezbollah in Lebanon, the plague of Assad in Syria, the plague of terror organizations in Judea and Samaria, the plague of the Houthis in Yemen, and 5 additional plagues upon Iran: the nuclear blow, the missile blow, the blow to regime infrastructure, the blow to forces of repression, and the plague of the firstborn, or in our case, the blow to the senior leadership. From the tyrant Khamenei through nuclear scientists to the arch murderers of the Revolutionary Guards and the Basij, not to mention earlier Nasrallah, Khania, De'ef, Sinwar, and many, many more. So we see the Prime Minister invoking some of the themes of the Passover here, and he actually goes on to make even 10 more different comparisons, but it's long, so we're not going to read it all.
Yeah, but it was a brilliant speech, and I can't add to anything that he said. We are living in biblical times.
And he concluded by saying that in the Passover Haggadah it notes, quote, "And it is this that has stood for our fathers and for us, that not only has one risen against us to destroy us, but the Holy One, blessed be He, saves us from their hands." That's a famous song that all Israelis sing, even those that are not religious will sing the song.
For over 2,000 years, to be accurate, over 3,300 years, Jews have been praying and saying that, and which connects us to who we are and what we are about. And every generation has to feel like that. This generation is definitely not only feeling it, but seeing it as well.
Well, on to some domestic politics here, because no week can go by without dealing with both the war and domestic issues. And if this was peacetime, I'm certain that this headline would have been the top headline, not only in the Israeli media, but also in the international media. The Knesset passed a law to give the death penalty, to apply the death penalty to terrorists. Lawmakers voted by 62 to 47 to mandate death by hanging as the default punishment for Palestinian residents that do not have Israeli citizenship convicted of deadly terrorist acts by military courts. The judges can opt for life imprisonment under vaguely defined, quote, special circumstances, but the death penalty would otherwise be mandatory. and carried out within 90 days of sentencing. And the vote marked a major victory for National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir of the Otzma Yehudit, the Jewish Strength Party, who has long championed this legislation.
You're going to be surprised. I'm against this. I think it's a political charade. It offers absolutely nothing. Not a single one of them is going to be executed, and therefore we should not be taking prisoners. And the terrorists should not be falling into our hands. They should be eliminated on the field, in the ground, because these 90 days, 90 minutes after such a decision, you're going to have international community. Not that I give a hoot what the international community says. I just want to remind people, if there's ever been in the history of mankind, humankind, an execution that was more justifiable than that of Eichmann, and even here, you had the Pope in Rome back in 1961, 62, whenever the decision was made. You had people here in Israel. You had these same bleeding heart liberals around the world criticizing Israel back then for deciding, after it was put in court, and this was just a few years after the West, the Allied forces executed Nazis in Europe for their involvement in the Nazi atrocities. When the Jewish people decided to execute Eichmann, who was responsible for the final solution, the world was suddenly opposed to that in Israel. Luckily, back then, they didn't wait, not 90 days. They eventually executed him. But that was Eichmann. Can you imagine what they're going to do now if we take any of these Mohammeds,
Street terrorists, yeah.
and terrorists? They're all terrorists. They'll become international figures. They'll be celebrated around the world. Suddenly there'll be these figures that everybody knows about. No, you don't make a situation like this. There is a death penalty already exists in Israel. It should have been applied to the members of what they call, I don't like using the word nukva because nukva is a very positive word in Arabic. I'm talking about those who committed the atrocities of October 7th, who raped, murdered children, butchered families. All these people do not deserve to live. They should not have been taken prisoner. They should have been killed on the spot. But since we have them, they should have already, not a single one of them, by the courts in Israel and by the Attorney General's office, not a single one of these terrorists has been taken to court up until now. And we're talking about 2.5 years since the war broke out. And they're dragging their feet on this deliberately because you have this opportunity for people to be self-righteous and show how noble they are. I don't care about their nobility. Their nobility didn't help the families that were massacred on October 7th. These terrorists should be taken out and executed now without making it into an international issue.
Meanwhile, this law that was passed would not apply to the terrorists of October 7th. It is only meant to apply to future terror attacks. And I think it's very likely that the Supreme Court of Israel will overturn this legislation. So, I don't expect any of these terrorists in the future to be killed by hanging. I agree with you. The international spectacle is probably not worth it. But you have to look at, I think, the rules of engagement on the field. Like we have seen terrorists get eliminated by soldiers, sometimes after they were initially neutralized, and then they go to jail for finishing the job against terrorists that were just a moment ago in the act of committing first-degree murder, and they wind up going to jail because of the liberal standards that are enforced by the legal establishment here in Israel. So I kind of agree with you. I think that what needs to happen is the loosening of the standards. If you put guns into the hands of our soldiers to protect the citizens against terrorists, they should be enabled to eliminate terrorists in the field. I think that this was mostly a political stunt, with Prime Minister Netanyahu even voting in favor, but giving something to his comrade in the coalition, Itamar Ben-Gvir, but ultimately recognizing that the court is likely to overturn it. At the same time, if you give credence to the court, when it overturns legislation like this, it's hard to criticize the court in other times. So, I don't necessarily like the dance that Netanyahu is playing with the court. And specifically, another issue that relates to the court over the weekend, we saw that the Israeli High Court ruled in an emergency ruling during a holiday and over the Sabbath that the regulations that the police had given to a public protest against the war needed to be loosened to allow as many as 600 people to participate in anti-government, anti-war protests at a time when the police is restricting gatherings of all kinds all across the country for security reasons. You only have 50 to 90 people going on a plane.
The police are enforcing it. It's the Home Front Command who, with their team of experts, decided what is possible and is not possible to preserve the lives of people here. So you have weddings that are limited, bar mitzvahs that are limited, any gathering. You had the football return, playing soccer returned yesterday, and there was nobody in the stadiums. So you limit the possibility of having large crowds. So this was done and decided by experts, and suddenly the court comes by and for political reasons and supporting the anti-war movement, decide that they can have 600 people demonstrating in Tel Aviv.
Well, it's not necessarily an anti-war movement. It's an anti-government movement,
Well,
right?
of course.
Always under the guise of whatever is the newest and the latest issue that the anti-government movement should be protesting against. And we have seen this all the way back to the days of COVID, right? During Corona, you had very strict restrictions on public gatherings, and that's a whole different story. And I think that the Israeli government probably handled that completely incorrectly, but we'll talk about that another time. But meanwhile, you could only exit your house basically to go to the doctor, to go to the supermarket, or to go to an anti-Netanyahu protest, which was protected. You know, anti-government protest was the most important value. And we see that the court works together with the opposition, together with this protest movement to apply pressure on all sides against the government. Meanwhile, just this morning, you would usually have the blessing of the priest, the Birkat Kohanim,
Right.
that would take place at the Western Wall. Usually you have gatherings of 50 to 100,000 people there. That was limited to 50 people in part of the Western Wall complex, which is in a tunnel to the side of that open complex. So meanwhile, the court's ruling that 600 people allowed to gather for a protest, but only 50 people allowed to gather for a religious ceremony or in a synagogue or anywhere else. So you really do see how the court is hypocritical in its rulings and is only ruling in favor of rulings that would harm the standing of the Israeli government.
And this is done by the president of the Supreme Court, who is self-appointed. He was not confirmed by the government, who by law is supposed to confirm. He appointed himself. And you have this thing happening for people to understand. You have this huge rift inside of Israel. So what you have here is the deep state, and really the deep state in Israel, trying to apply its rules and regulations and violating Jewish law. And we'll talk about this in a moment, how the Christians were not permitted to go to, Jews were not permitted either, but they let these demonstrators go and 600 of them go. And there were sirens at that time, and they flooded the shelter in Tel Aviv near where the demonstration was, that wasn't enough room for all the people who needed
right, and the people that live near there or are not protesting the government, they don't have access to the public shelter because the protesters, who demanded the right to be there are endangering the lives of those around them. And you actually had the Israeli police also claiming that members of their police force not only were forced to violate the Sabbath and the holiday in order to protect these protesters, but that they were doing so at risk to their own lives.
And nobody in the court cared about that.
Meanwhile, we saw last Sunday, which was Palm Sunday, that Israeli police blocked the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, Cardinal Pier Battista Pizzaballa, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, from entering the Church of the Holy Sepulchre to celebrate Mass. Now, obviously on Palm Sunday, you would see thousands of people going into the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
Right.
Now, the Cardinal was not going with thousands of people. It was just him and his staff. I think they said even less than a dozen people wanted to enter, but the Israeli police enforcing the same restrictions that they are enforcing on the Temple Mount, the same restrictions that they are enforcing on the Western Wall, enforced a restriction, and perhaps I think that they made a bad move. but a move that is being exploited by Christians around the world who are putting out this narrative that Israel does not protect Christian holy sites and Christian worship in the land of Israel.
And it's not the police. It's the few police that were stationed at that location. And just the Friday before that, you had hundreds of Muslims who wanted to go up, and they knew that there's restrictions, yet they create that, and they brought media with them. They had CNN there to film the fact that the Israelis are not letting them go up to the Temple Mount. But they knew this, so there was a deliberate provocation that they created. So the police who experienced that just on Friday, 2 days later, we're seeing again Arabs coming in. They don't know if it's Christian or Muslim. They could have been a bit more sensitive to it, but there's a lot of pressures on them, and they restricted it. When it came to the attention of the police chiefs, they immediately met with them and resolve the situation together with the priest himself, who he himself said this was not something done deliberately against Christians. So it was a misunderstanding,
Right.
but it was used as used.
So he put out the tweet later saying that the accommodation had been reached, but that was after
Right.
the headlines were created, and this is what happens in the narrative war against Israel, is that page 1 is the anti-Israel headline, and then page 822 a couple days later you have the correction to the headline, but still that doesn't stop all of the Israel haters around the world. And we even see Christians in the United States that Israel probably thought were its friends, but there's this unique sect within this MAGA movement there, which includes people like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Jack Posobiec, Steve Bannon, others, that been to Israel many times, that were seen as Israel allies potentially, turning on Israel and putting forth this narrative that Israel, which is the only country in the Middle East and beyond that protects Christian places of worship and Christian ability to worship, gets shunned for some narrative that they actually don't do that. And this cardinal, we've seen him many times wearing keffiyeh. So he's not by any means an ally of Israel, but numerous efforts were made to try to reach a conciliation on this very quickly. President Herzog, wrote that he had just called the Land Patriarch of Jerusalem, his beatitude, Cardinal Pier Battista Pizzaballa, to express his great sorrow over the unfortunate incident in the Old City of Jerusalem, in which the cardinal and others were prevented from entering the Church of the Holy Sepulchre for prayers amid the ongoing security situation. He clarified that the incident stemmed from security concerns due to the continuous threat of missile attacks. Meanwhile, it was only a week prior that a cluster warhead landed on one of the buildings in the compound of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. At least 2 other missiles landed in the Old City of Jerusalem. So I think good reasons potentially why the Homefront Command doesn't want these types of gatherings, but always an opportunity to exploit.
Very important to remember that the Temple Mount area, or El Aqsa as the Arabs call it, it's sacred to the Sunni, not to the Shia. So Iran has no problem with firing in the direction of the holy places in Jerusalem. So that's why they're so, the Israeli police and the Israeli security are so careful, knowing that it's a legitimate, and even for many reasons, probably a target that the Iranians are interested in, because seeing how this caused trouble to Israel.
Well, if you actually look inside certain sources of Sunni scholars, they will tell you that there are 2 holy places in Islam, Mecca and Medina, and that the Al-Aqsa Mosque was created later in order to create a place that would be known as a Muslim shrine, on the place where the Jewish Holy Temple was. I just this week went to the Cave of the Patriarchs in Hebron, and that's also another Jewish holy place that's been converted into a mosque. So we do see how Muslims will take Jewish holy places and convert them into a mosque. It should be noted that the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is not this golden dome of the rock, the place where the Muslims actually pray on the Temple Mount, is on the south side of the Temple Mount. And we know that Sunni Muslims pray towards Mecca. And the mosque was specifically put on the south side of the Temple Mount compound in order that when people would be bowing down and praying towards Mecca, that their rear ends, and you can see many pictures of this, are facing this Dome of the Rock, this supposedly holy shrine. But if it was a holy shrine, you would not be praying with your rear end directly to the holy shrine. And in fact, there was an opinion that you needed to put the mosque specifically on the south side, because there was another opinion. Let's put the mosque on the north side, because if we put the mosque on the north side, we can pray facing Mecca, and we'll also be facing this shrine. And the opinion was to specifically put it on the south side so that nobody would think that anybody was praying towards the Shrine of the Rock, that Muslims only prayed towards Mecca. But this is a holy week for not just Jews, also Christians in the Holy Land. And Prime Minister Netanyahu put out a special statement towards the Christian brethren, both those living in Israel and supporters of Israel around the world. Benjamin Netanyahu wrote just this morning on Easter Sunday, to our Christian friends in Israel, the United States, and around the world, we wish you a blessed and joyful Easter. Christians are persecuted across the Middle East and Syria, Lebanon, Nigeria, Turkey, and beyond. But in our region, Israel alone protects our Christian community, which is growing and prospering. So he asks that may the message of renewal, hope, and faith shine brightly in your homes and hearts. Happy Easter. And I do think that this is an important time to sincerely thank those non-Jews around the world, Christians and others, that support the state of Israel, that recognize the beacon of truth amidst all the lies that are in the media, social media, and in the invented narratives that spread very, very quickly around the world. Israel, which is a Jewish state by nature, very, very tolerant of anybody that wants to worship God in any form in peace, as long as that's the overriding theme, that of peace. Israelis think, very happy to live together with anybody who just wants to protect the common good.
I couldn't put it any better than you have. I agree with you completely on that.
So this has been another episode, a Passover episode. We'll be celebrating the seventh day of Passover this week. That's the time in which Jews celebrate the splitting of the Red Sea, the incident in the Torah, the episode in the Torah that is one of the greatest prophecies of all time, as Jewish people all gathered in prophetic song after the miraculous crossing of the Red Sea on dry land, and the destruction of Pharaoh's army, which basically put the slavery of Jews in Egypt to bed, and is the Independence Day, the birth of the Jewish people as a free and independent nation. And we continue to fight for the independence and freedom of the Jewish people here in the land of Israel. Danny Seaman, my co-host today, Alex Trayman, coming to you from the JNS Media Hub in Jerusalem. I'd like to give thanks to Aaron Wogelwenter, who came in special on the Passover holiday to run the board. Also, Barbara Chaimov, who's our producer, Zach Sickerman, who put together a lot of the outline for this event, Yuri Sfursky, who runs the whole production here, and all the rest of the JNS staff. If you like this video, click subscribe. If you think you've done it, double check, make sure you do it. Give a super thanks, make a donation to JNS. Thank you, and we'll see you next week.